Scanning. Scanning is the phase where an attacker actually goes through and tries to figure out as much as you can. This is a little bit more active. There is some passive scanning as well. But my goal here in the scanning technique is to go through and gather as much information, see if I can identify your operating systems. And believe it or not, that can be done through just normal traffic. It's kind of interesting that Linux boxes respond to certain types of network traffic a specific way versus an Apple computer responds a different way versus a Microsoft OS, which responds a completely different way. So I want to go through and I want to see if I can identify those systems using some, I'm going to try first using some passive scanning techniques. And a passive scanning technique would be something like just sniffing the traffic. I'm not actually touching anybody, I'm just sniffing so I can identify the machines that are out there that are talking. An active scan would be me doing a ping sweep. Now, I also want to be able to not only map out systems, but I also want to be able to map out other hardware devices. I want to be able to see if I can detect where firewalls are, where routers are. If I can discover the IP address scheme that you're using, many times I can go through and say, okay, it looks like he's using the first 100 IP addresses of this subnet for network devices and the last 50 of that subnet for printers. Well, that just tells me which targets I can stay clear of and which targets I can just completely ignore. Now, believe it or not, there are some very, very easy tools out there that I can use, such as a simple trace route or even a path ping. There's also some other tools that we'll get into, and when we get into the scanning course, CHIOPS, which is actually a management tool, but attackers will use that technology to try to scan your network and ID your systems. So after I've gone through and ID'd all my nodes or devices on my network, based off of the results that I get back, you know, if it's a Windows machine or a Linux machine or whatever the OS may be or a hardware device may be, I'm going to start looking for vulnerabilities. And this is actually where when we talk about making sure that you have a great understanding of vulnerability research comes into play, because things are changing continuously. If you don't know about the latest and greatest, you may look at something and go, oh, that's just our Cisco access point that's sitting out there and it's okay. Well, guess what? There may be a zero-day attack out there on that particular router, and there may be a vulnerability. Now, after we gather that information, the next thing we want to do is use some tools. And what we're going to do with these tools is we're going to try to expose as much information as we can. And the types of tools that we'll use will be like a port scanner that's going to go through and look at ports that may be opened up by services. And one of the ways that you protect yourself from this type of scan is to make sure that services aren't running on machines that shouldn't be running, that have no business running on those machines. And we're going to do that by doing some proper auditing of systems. Another type of tool that we'll be using will be a vulnerability scanner. And again, by the way, these tools, again, are used by the attackers, not only by you, but also by attackers. And typically they're ripped off or pirated. But we're going to go through and see what vulnerabilities, really some really nice software out there that goes through and tells me as a network admin, hey, all my the following machines don't have the latest service pack installed for Windows 7 or Windows 8.1. Those same type of scanners, attackers are going to run on your network to see if they can figure out where their entry point is. And if you haven't invested in one of these vulnerability scanners for your own network, I highly recommend that you find a solution that meets the needs of your company, because trust me, if you're not scanning for the vulnerabilities, somebody else who shouldn't be is to try to get into your network.